Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some entitled people stories today, and we've got two very different but equally explosive tales of entitlement meeting its match. We'll be comparing them at the end, so let's get into it. The owner's spoiled daughter and her incompetent manager had to close the place. I worked at a restaurant. We had a front salad bar, a buffet with a salad bar, as well as things like a juice bar and ice cream counter and a small alcohol room with a bar. It was so popular and also a bit expensive, but somehow so underpaid, understaffed, and poorly managed. Jenny's the daughter and the only child of the owners of the restaurant. She's extremely spoiled. She almost always gets her way, and she has a temper where she'll get pissed off and just lay into the person for an hour straight. She used to come in screaming at everyone for nothing and made racist or nasty jokes. She'd push people to come in sick, then ask why they were slow. Just the typical manager from hell. Marco, one of the kitchen managers, is the son of a family friend and a beloved member of the community. His management consisted of micromanaging, criticizing our work, blaming random people for things, giving extreme time constraints for tasks, encouraging everyone to smile, and going around asking people, while they were in the middle of working their 3 jobs, when they wanted to come in the next day or if they'd like to cover a shift on Saturday or whatever. He'd forget to do things and then blame other people. Then he would go around criticizing people for their time management or responsibility. Anytime we reported that something was broken or something wasn't working, he just told us to figure it out and nothing would be done about it until Jenny came in screaming at everyone and narrowed it down to Marco. We had other managers coming in and out. They couldn't take it. There were people who were suddenly hired to take on big positions despite having no idea what they were doing or joined with less than a full day of training just because the place was desperate. The waitresses were paid less than $4 an hour, and some of them were doing part of the dishwasher's duties, front manager duties, cleaning jobs including kitchen and employee bathroom. I want to say dishwashing was the worst, as 3 different people would come to work drunk or high every day just to tolerate everything. My coworker Dean kept up even when other dishwashers weren't working, helped me or the waitress clean, and literally had to monitor food that was cooking, and he'd keep track of orders because the manager, Marco, and the chef wanted to mess around or go stand by the door and smoke. There were days where staff members would break down or get sick pulling a double shift, and he did everything for them. There was no choice. My job was preparing and filling food items for the main salad bar in front every day, and some days I also did salad bar in the buffet. I had other things to do as part of my normal salad/buffet job, including making food for reservations, preparing and stocking juice bar, and helping move stock into the freezers and fridge. On top of that, I was packing non-salad food for delivery and takeout, helping maintain and stock up to half the buffet, helping waitresses keep up with serving and bussing, doing ice cream and desserts, cleaning the whole kitchen and storage areas and customer bathrooms, helping the bar staff, helping at the front desk whenever I was out, and preparing ingredients or fetching things for the normal chef/buffet chefs. All for a little more than minimum wage. I fell every day because I was running on wet floors and I had a heat stroke and even had to go to the ER for injuries. On buffet days, I had a partner, but that didn't matter. She just stood around right in front of the manager, Marco, talking to her cousin who worked there while watching me work, and both she and Marco would take breaks every now and then to criticize my work or my speed. Everything was held together by Dean and me. We were teenagers on Rockstar drinks, so we took whatever was coming to us. We kept everything going so well that we got scheduled to work almost every day, then every weekend. Jenny gave us free soda privilege, and we got raises 2 times in 5 months, which were only 10 cents, but did look good to me because my dad praised all of my paychecks. He didn't know what was going on and that I was working crazy hours and thought I was overpaid. Most of the customers were very sweet, so we tried our best to be of service, and a lot of them were regulars or people who came in to support Marco or everyone. There was always so much pressure on Dean and me. Also, Dean isn't white, and he would always get racist jokes and comments towards him. Marco and Jenny either did nothing or were the offenders. Most of the criticism or Marco's projection went to him, despite him doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing and occasionally messing up due to extreme stress or time constraint. After a certain point, almost every criticism was race-based in some way. You and Dean were the human duct tape holding the whole broken place together. They paid you in pennies and free soda because they knew you were young, desperate, and would absorb the abuse. You were their pressure valve. The whole business ran on your willingness to destroy yourselves for it. One horrible Saturday, there were 3 times as many reservations as usual. On top of all bars and buffet being opened, I clocked in and found out one of the managers let go of Dean the afternoon before. Absolutely no one knew why, including Dean, and I'm really assuming it was Marco. I already had zero hope for the day, and the only thing fueling me was the customers and my paycheck, of course. In just the first hour, I passed Marco at least 5 times trying to get things done. There was one time we accidentally made eye contact while I was helping a waitress, but at some point I went to the freezer in the back to help load some ice cream in, and he happened to walk in at the same time that I was standing there for 3 seconds doing nothing, waiting for my coworker to bring in the dolly. He gave me this frustrated look like, "Get back to work." He caught me maybe half an hour later while I was coming into the back of the kitchen near the freezer to mop up some spilled water. The final time he caught me, I was in the freezer again looking at the inventory to see what fruit we had enough of, because I could only serve what we had enough of in case people requested more, and Marco had enough. He said, "The place is busy as F and you're in here just standing in the freezer for like 4 hours. Go home." I gave him this look like WTF, and he reiterated that I was done for the night. I was not arguing with Marco. This was not my problem. I just said thanks, took my apron off, and headed out. Both the employee doors were blocked by trash cans and my partner standing there with a whole cart of things talking to her cousin, so I went to use the main side door in the front of the restaurant. Jenny saw me and asked where I was going. I put on a smile and said, "Man, Marco's the best guy ever. He just randomly came up to me and told me to take the night off." Jenny's face went from confused to shocked to livid in the span of 1 second. She quickly told me, "Don't go just yet," and she stormed into the kitchen screaming, "Marco!" I pretended to not hear her over the music and customers, and I just turned around and left. I got over 10 phone calls, but I simply let my phone ring. I waited until my partner updated her Facebook status with "finally closed, girl next time," or something like that, and I finally texted Marco back and gave an apology that sucked up in the most condescending way, but in a way that was personal that only he would understand if he were to show it to someone. I came back the next morning and it was a complete disaster. Marco and Jenny came in looking dead tired because they spent the rest of the night and overtime busting butt trying to keep things going. There were actually dishes and trash bags piled up. Both the buffet and kitchen were wrecked because Jenny and her dad didn't want to keep the workers late and pay them overtime. The restaurant had to close for the summer. They posted all these job opportunities in schools and on Facebook and eventually opened back up. But I never answered, and Dean didn't accept them in, so it was a whole spiral. Because of me leaving and Dean being fired, they had to close down their ice cream and minimize their buffet, and now they close earlier because they can't handle it. There are less customers supporting Marco, and there were even customers saying they aren't coming back until Marco or Jenny leaves. There's a waitress who joined during my time there, and it was her first job ever. Now she's the only previous employee left, and she ended up getting appointed as a manager at some point. I think they had to offer her a lot of money to stay because she bought a new house. Marco is the only other manager now. Marco's still asking me to come back, and since I deleted Facebook, I kept that phone number open with prepaid service on my old phone just for the purpose of reading his text during my lunch. The restaurant didn't just lose an employee, it lost its backbone, its reliability, and its ability to function at all. The fact that it's now a skeleton of itself, closing early with no ice cream, a minimized buffet, and Marco begging you to come back is the proof. You and Dean weren't replaceable cogs, you were the whole damn machine, and they only realized it after they broke you. And our next story. Karen was loud and drunk. I did some detective work and her career didn't survive the trip. I'm a South African living in Japan, and I took my Japanese wife to meet my parents and have a honeymoon in South Africa. On the first of 3 flights back to Japan was from Joburg to Qatar. We take our seats and get settled in. I noticed that a lot of the passengers around us were wearing the same t-shirts, some kind of pharmaceutical company. As soon as we got settled in, I noticed that the woman and 2 men sat behind us were also employees of this company. As soon as they got settled in, I noticed she, let's call her Karen, was quite chatty, loud, and a bit obnoxious. But I'm a nervous flyer, so at the time I was more worried about the takeoff than her. So I put my AirPods on and whoosh, we take off for our 8-hour flight to Qatar. As soon as the seatbelt sign switched off, Karen started ordering Karen and Cokes for herself and her 2 coworkers. As each drink came, Karen's voice got louder and more obnoxious. After drink number 6, the topic of her conversation turns to relationships. By this time, half the cabin could hear their conversation about how she disapproves of interracial relationships. Even I could hear her through the guttural screams and face-melting guitar riffs of the Architects blasting through my AirPods. Then it happened. A nice woman sitting on 4 seats to her left quite loudly says, "Ma'am, could you please quiet down? You're a bit loud and I'm trying to get some sleep." I heard it too, so paused the song and took out my left ear pod to excitedly eavesdrop. Karen was not happy. She says, "Excuse me, this isn't a nighttime flight. Haven't you heard of earplugs?" And then jumped straight back into her conversation. The tension in the air immediately changed. In that moment, all the people who heard the interaction caught eyes with each other, and we all knew this flight was about to get interesting. About 20 minutes later, a flight attendant comes and politely asks Karen to quiet down a bit. She begrudgingly agrees, orders another round, and quiets down, but it only takes Karen about 30 minutes to get all the way back up to volume louder than the jet engines roaring outside the windows. Then another Chinese woman from the other side of the cabin gets up and walks to where Karen is sitting, and in her best attempt at English says, "Please be quiet. My child keeps waking up because of you." Karen looks up and, I crap you not, asks this Chinese woman in very mispronounced Chinese, "Can you speak Chinese?" I'm fluent in Chinese, so I could understand what she was trying to say, and just kept repeating it until the frustrated Chinese woman went back to her seat. By this time, both flight attendants for our cabin were very much aware of Karen's sassy nature and decided to close the bar for the whole cabin, which pissed me off because I was hoping to enjoy a few more whiskeys before we landed. A few minutes later, I heard sound of shuffling, then plastic, and then the faint sound of what sounds like the cap of a glass bottle being cracked open. Then the sound of liquid being poured into cups. Yep, Karen had opened her bottle of duty-free Karen she bought at the airport, and once again their conversation began to crescendo. Now, the whole time I'd been spectating the Karen situation, I wasn't really paying attention to my wife, who I assumed was sleeping next to me. I then saw my wife pull one of her AirPods out, turn to try and get a look at Karen through the crack in the seat, and then turn to look at me with a face I rarely see my wife make. It was a face of pure rage and frustration. I snapped. Now, usually I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause a scene, but I decided that I'm not going to let this a-hole of a woman ruin my wife's flight. So, like a crazy person, I stood up and announced loud enough that the entire cabin turned to hear me, "Excuse me, everybody, can I please have all of your attention? By show of hands, who of you would like these people to shut the F up?" About 30 passengers all around us raised their hands. I then turn to Karen, and I just point and say, "Look, understand? Shut up." I sat back down to the sound of applause from all the passengers that were raising their hands. My wife was shocked that I did that, but I told her that I did it because I could see that Karen was beginning to bother you too. She gave me a hug, and the flight attendant that saw what I did brought me a cup of Coke, but slipped me 2 of those little bottles of whiskey. You weren't the first person she bothered. 2 other women had already tried and failed. When you stood up, you were giving a voice to the whole cabin's frustration. That show of hands was proof. She wasn't fighting one person anymore. She was fighting the entire section she'd been terrorizing. Thankfully, Karen and the gang then passed out and were quiet for the rest of the flight, so my wife and I could relax. But Karen wasn't finished. And now she had a new target, me. On our descent, Karen awakes and decides that she wants to play some cards on the entertainment screen attached to the back of my seat, trying her best to hit the buttons hard enough to make my seat move. I teach kids for a living, so I know that she's behaving like an angry toddler trying to get a rise out of me, so I ignore her. We land, the plane taxis off the runway, and everyone starts getting up to get off the plane. As soon as I get up and she sees my wife and I, she starts repeatedly insulting me about my weight and how I married an Asian woman because I can't get a real South African woman, blah, blah, blah. High school bully level bull's gut. I just smile and nod my head at everything she was saying and exit the plane. Finally, Karen and her coworkers walk off, and my wife and I find a nice cafe to have a coffee and chill and stretch for a bit before we make our way to the next boarding gate for our second flight to Malaysia. We eventually get to the gate, and lo and behold, guess who's also flying to Malaysia? That's right, it's Karen. She's standing by the gate window taking selfies and doesn't notice me. I find an empty seat next to a guy wearing the same pharmaceutical company t-shirt and say, "Excuse me, sir, that woman over there with blonde hair taking a selfie, what's her name?" He asked me why, and I say that she looks like someone I used to go to high school with, but I wasn't sure and didn't want to make a butt out of myself asking her directly. He tells me, and I say, "Oh, then it's not her, sorry." I thank him, and for the remainder of the wait at the gate, logged into the airport Wi-Fi, found their company's Facebook page and website, and sent a detailed recount of Karen's behavior, being sure to include all the colorful things she was talking about with her coworkers. While she was taking selfies at the gate, you were already working on her pink slip. Getting her name from her coworker was a slick move. That meant your complaint to the company wasn't from some random passenger. It was a detailed report naming a specific employee who was on a work trip representing them badly. You turned her layover into her final warning. The next 2 flights back to Japan were uneventful and got home safe and sound. 2 weeks later, I get a reply from the CEO asking me for my number as he would like to talk to me about what happened. He calls me and profusely apologizes for what Karen put us through. Turns out that by the time Karen landed in Malaysia, the CEO had seen my message, changed her return flight back to South Africa for the very next day, and fired her at arrivals in JHB Airport when she got back. I bought a bottle of Karen and Coke on my way home from work that day to celebrate with my lovely wife. Both stories show what happens when someone in a position of power, whether a manager or a loud, disruptive passenger, mistakes tolerance for weakness. In the first story, the backbone of the restaurant finally snapped, revealing that the owner's daughter and her manager weren't leaders. They were parasites on the hard work of others. In the second, one passenger's outrage became the catalyst for an entire cabin's revolt, which then led directly to her professional downfall. The common thread? Entitlement only works until the people enabling it decide to stop. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.